You see, the Bible is God's great love story. He is in love with all people from all nations. And he says to all people, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I actually started as an agnostic. I believed that Jesus was probably just a man made into a legend, that God, who knows? There's probably not a God, but there's just no evidence. I was an engineer by former career, so I've always been very analytical. And my dad was dying of cancer, and someone gave him the very first book on this that coined the term near-death experience. And I picked it up and I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. And at the end, I said, oh my gosh, like this might be the actual evidence I've been asking for, that this afterlife and God, Jesus stuff is real. Because so many were talking about this God of light and love and seeing Jesus. So as a result, I started studying the Bible, and about a year or so after I came to faith, I ended up going from a career in engineering into ministry, and over the last 35 years, I've had this curiosity trying to understand how do these near-death experiences align with what God's revealed in Scripture. And I've now interviewed, studied probably about 1,500 near-death experiences from around the globe. And in 2015, I wrote a book called Imagine Heaven, where I show that the 40 commonalities of what people say they experience aligns with the Bible's view of the afterlife. And I recently wrote a book called Imagine the God of Heaven, because of all the people I interviewed, they would say that of all the beauty of heaven, of all the amazing reunions with people you love, nothing could compare with just being in the presence of God. That He is the love you've always wanted. And so this book focuses on God's story and His heart and His character. But you may be asking, well, why do you believe these near-death experiences? How do you know they're not just hallucinations or endorphins flooding the brain at death, or maybe anoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain, maybe just a trick the brain's playing? And I thought through all of those, and I don't have time to go into it, but in chapter 2 of Imagine the God of Heaven, I go through the 10 points of evidence that convinced me when I was still a skeptical medical doctor. I'll quickly just give you 3. You can read it on your own. 1, verifiable observations. Like Heidi said, when people die, they're usually first up above their body, and they're able to see and report on what's happening in their resuscitation when they come back. So they can report things that can be verified that they should not have been able to see. Second, when people blind from birth have a near-death experience, they can see. And they report seeing and report the same things that sighted people having near-death experiences say, which could not be in the brain because they had never had a thing called sight in their brains. And third thing that convinced me is that all over the globe, despite their cultural or religious expectations, people encounter the same God of light and love. And that's who I want to talk about today. Because the truth is, God didn't just start revealing Himself in the age of near-death experiences. He's been revealing Himself throughout history. And what I discovered is the Bible is actually God's love story with all the nations. If you zoom out and you really look at it, 4,000 years ago, this is before any world religion that we know of now was put down in writing, God says this to Abraham and Sarah in Genesis chapter 12. It says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. See, God has always been the God of all nations. And He says He's going to create a nation, the Jewish nation, to bless all nations in 2 ways. 1, to record the Scriptures, which we have. And second, to foretell the coming of this Messiah who would die to pay for the sins of all people of all nations, so that they could be made right with God. And then finally, in the last book of the Bible, John says he sees heaven, and here's what he says. He saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb Jesus, and they're worshiping. And then it says there's a great wedding. A wedding. How bizarre. Between God and all the people who love him. You see, the Bible is God's great love story. He is in love with all people from all nations. And he says to all people, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart.